If your cloud architect portfolio is filled with Terraform scripts, Linux commands, and engineering projects, it's likely hurting your chances of getting hired. It's not helping you, but most likely hurting you, because when a hiring manager is going to look at your portfolio, they're not asking if you know how to deploy cloud resources. What the hiring manager is asking is, can the person do the job of a cloud architect? And that's a very different question. So today, I'm going to show you what belongs in a real cloud architect portfolio when you actually have the experience and the skills to get hired. Because a great portfolio will help you get your first architect job, but only if it looks like the work of a real cloud architect. Not a cloud engineer, not a sysadmin, not a DevOps engineer, but an actual cloud architect. Let's discuss the real purpose of your portfolio. Your portfolio is there to prove that you can think, communicate, and make decisions like a cloud architect. When a company hires anyone, the hiring manager has to ask themselves this question: can the person do the job? Which means the hiring manager is going to assess you on these capabilities. Can you sit with business leaders and influence stakeholders? Can you translate between business challenges into an appropriate architecture decision? Can you evaluate trade-offs? Can you reduce risk? Can you control cost? Can you communicate properly with the right architecture artifacts that you created? And that's what the hiring manager is trying to figure out. And if you don't have experience and it's your first cloud architecture job, your portfolio is proof. Your portfolio is the evidence that you can do the job. Your portfolio says, I may not have had the job title of a cloud architect yet, but I understand the work. And that is extremely powerful. A great cloud architect portfolio is like walking into an interview with gold bars in your pocket, because it gives the hiring manager something concrete to evaluate. It helps them see your thinking, your judgment, your communication skills, and your business acumen. And most importantly, it shows you can do the job. But here's where most people destroy their chances without even realizing it. They make this big portfolio mistake. Most cloud architects build the wrong portfolio. They're full of engineering projects. They're full of Terraform modules, Linux automation. Now, is that bad work? No, not at all. It's extremely great work for a cloud engineer. But a cloud engineer is not the same as a cloud architect. It's a different job with a different goal and a different set of skills. And if you're applying for a cloud architect job, this distinction matters, because engineers build, but architects decide. Engineers configure, but architects design. Engineers deploy, but architects align business goals with technology architectures. Engineers focus on how to build something, but architects focus more on what should be built, why it should be built, what trade-offs exist, and what risk must be managed. The function of the job is just different. So when your portfolio is full of engineering work, you're sending the wrong signal to the hiring manager. You're telling the employer, I know how to build things, but I have no idea what cloud architecture actually is. And that is why some people with so many certifications, labs, and technical projects don't get hired for cloud architect jobs, because they prove technical familiarity, but they don't prove architecture competency. Look, technical skills are necessary. They are very necessary, but technical skills alone are just not sufficient. A certification may help you understand a cloud service, for example. A lab may help you understand the configuration that an engineer would do. A deployment project may help you understand how engineers implement. But none of that will prove your business acumen, your executive communication, your ability to manage stakeholders, your ability to create a governance structure that works, your leadership, or even your architectural decision making. And those are the skills that separate cloud architects from cloud engineers. Here's the surprising truth. The best cloud architect portfolio is not the one with the most technology in it. It's the one with the most executive relevance. Now, if you're coming from a technical background, like a strong engineering background, that may feel backwards to you. But remember, this is not an engineering job. This is an architecture job. So you need to show your architectural thinking. You need to prove that you understand the business context, can make business decisions, and justify investments. You need to show that you can explain trade-offs. See, cloud architecture is not knowing what services exist. I mean, that's part of it. But for we cloud architects, it's about using technology to create a desired business outcome. And that's why your portfolio must answer key questions like, what business problem are we solving? What are the limitations with the current architectural state? What is the target architecture and why? What trade-offs do we evaluate in the design of our architecture? What risk did we reduce? What business outcomes did we create? And that's what the hiring manager wants to see in your portfolio. Because the moment your portfolio starts looking like an architect and has the real work products of an architect, your interview changes, and it changes dramatically. So what belongs in a real cloud architect portfolio? So let's talk about that. So in your portfolio, you should not have random projects. You should not have tool demonstrations or lab screenshots, not for an architect, but actual architecture work projects, meaning the same things an architect would create while performing their role as a cloud architect. So here's some things that are going to prove you're a great architect. Your portfolio should include reference architectures. A reference architecture is a reusable architecture pattern that you create. It shows how common business or technical problems should be solved in a consistent way. For example, a secure cloud landing zone might be a good reference architecture. A hub and spoke wide area network architecture could be a good architecture for there. A zero trust cloud architecture could be a perfect reference architecture that fits in your portfolio, as is hybrid cloud connectivity could be good reference architectures. Now, here's the key. I don't want you to just draw an architecture diagram. I want you to explain the purpose. I want you to explain the business problem, explain the assumptions, explain the security controls, the cost considerations, and even the trade-offs. Explain when to use the reference architecture, but more importantly, when not to. And that is architecture. See, a diagram by itself is a pretty decoration. A reference architecture that has the business context around it is real architectural work. Another thing that belongs in your cloud architect portfolio, or any architect portfolio for that matter, are architecture decision records. And your portfolio should include them. You may hear them called as ADRs. Now, an architecture decision record is there to explain a decision. It shows what options were considered, what trade-offs were considered, and why a specific option was selected. And this is extremely important because architects are paid for our decisions and our decision-making ability, not the ability to deploy things, because that's the cloud engineer's job. So, for example, you could create an architectural decision record for choosing containers versus serverless, choosing managed databases versus self-managed databases, choosing centralized SIEM and SOAR integration, choosing a cloud landing zone model. But the key is your architecture decision record should be real. It should have the business context, should have the decision that's being made, and the options that were considered. The pros, the cons, the risk, and the ultimate impact. And then, of course, in an architectural decision record, there is a final recommendation and the reason for the recommendation. See, that shows your decision-making, and architecture is a job of decision-making. The next thing that belongs in your portfolio are business cases. This is where technical people often are weak if they lack business acumen, but this is where architects become highly valuable. See, an executive is not going to fund an architecture because they think the diagrams are pretty or the tech is cool. The executives will fund the architecture because it solves a business problem. So as architects, we must create a business case that explains why the architecture matters. For example, we might have a business case for a cloud migration, or a business case for some application modernization, or a business case for a cloud landing zone. Now, a business case should include the business problem, the cost of either doing nothing and the impact to the business, as well as what this architecture will do and the expected benefits for the business. And of course, the recommended investment, the reduced that are risked with your architecture, the cost savings that occur with your architecture, and the actual business impact of your architecture. And this is powerful because now your portfolio is showing you can connect an architecture with a business outcome. And that's exactly what hiring managers are looking for in a great cloud architect. And this is why a business case in your portfolio can be far more powerful than another technical lab. As is and to be architectures, your portfolio should include the current state, often referred to as is, and the target state, often referred to as 2B. Because this is one of the most critical architecture skills. Architects must be able to understand where the organization is today and where it needs to go. The as-is architecture is going to show exactly what they have now. The 2B architecture shows the future environment that we've designed. But we can't just stop at what we have and where we're going. We have to explain the gaps. Explain what's not working right now and why we need to change it. Explain what risks exist. Explain what is currently slowing the business down now and why we need to change. So I want you to be able to explain what needs to change. For example, in the current state, the company may have a lot of unmanaged cloud accounts, inconsistent security, no centralized logging, a lot of manual provisioning, and very limited visibility into what's going on. And that's problematic. So maybe for the target state, the company moves to a governed cloud landing zone with some centralized identity, some standardized networking, some automated security guardrails, centralized SIEM and source systems for logging and monitoring, and a good plan for cost management. See, the key is you want to show the transformation, going from where we're at to where we want to go and how it will impact the business, because that is architecture. Architecture is not just drawing a picture. In fact, we draw very few pictures actually as an architect in our actual roles. Architecture is explaining how we're going to move the business from where they're at, the current state, to the future target state of that business. Roadmaps. Your architecture portfolio should include roadmaps. Executives and other key stakeholders want to know how the organization goes from where we're at today to where they need to go in the future. And that roadmap will give a sequence. It will show the priority, it will show key dependencies, and it will show what we need to do now, next, and then later. For example, we may have a phase 1, establish cloud governance, establish a strong identity approach, the network foundation, and logging. Phase 2, we might migrate some low-risk workloads and validate the operating model. Phase 3, we may modernize some high-value applications. In phase 4, we may optimize cost, resilience, and security controls. And in phase 5, we may scale the platform across the entire enterprise. Now, by being able to plan and show the roadmap, you're showing leadership. You're showing you can sequence what it takes to go from where they're at to where they need to go. And it shows that you understand architecture is not just technical design. Architecture is getting the entire organization to change, which takes a whole lot of change management. Policies, procedures, and guidelines. Your portfolio should include governance artifacts. This is another area where aspiring artifacts often fail. They think that architecture is just a diagram, but it's not. Architecture also includes governance. How should teams use the cloud? What standards should they follow? What risks are acceptable? What controls do we need to put in place? What exceptions should we allow? And even who approves what? And some examples of governance we might create would include something like a cloud tagging policy, an IAM policy, some encryption standards, some cloud cost management guidelines, some architecture review procedure. But the key is that's governance. And see, when you create governance artifacts, you're showing that you understand all the components of architecture, including governance. Because without governance, the architecture will become chaos. And that's one of the fastest ways to show that you are thinking like an architect, having real governance in there. So you have smooth architectures. The next thing is RFP responses. Your portfolio can include various requests for proposal responses or other vendor evaluation artifacts. Now, why? We architects constantly help organizations evaluate vendors, various cloud providers, various platforms, and solutions. So you could create a sample RFP response or a vendor evaluation for a business scenario. For example, a company needs a cloud contact center platform, or a company needs a cloud security posture management solution, or a company needs a strong and managed multi-cloud Kubernetes platform. And you can put that in your portfolio, which can show the business requirements, the technical requirements, the security requirements, the compliance requirements, any vendors that you compared along the way, some scoring criteria, and even some recommendations. And this is going to prove that you understand architecture decisions far beyond the cloud console. So let me show you the difference between a weak cloud architect portfolio and a strong one that's going to help you get hired. In a weak portfolio, I see something that says, I built a 3-tier web app using AWS, using EC2, RDS, an application load balancer, auto scaling, and I deployed it with Terraform. That might be a useful learning project, but it's very engineering-like. Now let's talk about what belongs in a strong portfolio, the kind that's going to get you hired. You may say something like, I created a cloud architecture for a customer-facing application that needed high availability, strong security, and low operational overhead. I evaluated 3 design options, documented the trade-offs, and created an architecture decision record. After that, I developed a business case and defined the target state architecture. From a governance perspective, I even created standards for identity, logging, encryption, and cost control. Now that is a very strong architecture portfolio. And notice the difference. The weak version said I built something, which is what engineers do or admins do. The strong version says I made architecture decisions to solve a business problems. And that's the game we play as architects. We're not there to build, we're there to solve business problems. So let's talk about what your portfolio should look like. We definitely don't want a GitHub dump. I definitely don't want to see a collection of random labs on someone that I interview because they're not going to get hired if they do. We don't want it to look like a certification studying notebook. We want a portfolio that's created around real architectures and real business scenarios. For example, scenario 1, we have a healthcare company that needs a secure cloud landing zone. Maybe the scenario 2 in your portfolio is a fintech company that needs a highly available customer platform. Maybe scenario 3 is a retail company that needs cloud cost optimization and strong governance. The key is that's what belongs in your portfolio. Now for each scenario, create all the architecture artifacts. Talk about the business problem, the key business requirements, whatever constraints existed, whatever risks existed, document the current state, the as-is architecture, if there is one, the to-be architecture that you created, create some various reference architecture patterns, some various architectural decision records, and even a business case that shows why invest in it. Put some roadmaps in your portfolio. Maybe create some policies, standards, and guidelines and put them in their portfolio. And of course, an executive summary of what's in that portfolio. And that's going to be how you create a portfolio that feels like that of an architect. And when a hiring manager sees that, what they say to themselves is, this person understands the work. This person can communicate like a cloud architect in business terms. This person can make decisions. This person knows how to create the right types of architectural artifacts. And even though this person may lack experience, I know that they can actually function as a cloud architect. And that's what you want. Because your goal is not to show that you studied cloud. Everybody studies cloud. Your goal is to show that you can act and operate like a cloud architect because that's what gets hired. Now let's talk about why this matters in your interview. A strong portfolio does far more than help you just get noticed. It changes the interviews. Because instead of you having to beg the employer to believe you and believe you can do the job, you can walk them through your work. You can say, here is a business problem I designed around. Here was the current state. Here was the target state. Here were the trade-offs that were evaluated. Here's some architectural decision records. Here's the business case. And here's the roadmap. Here are the artifacts that I created, because now you're interviewing like someone that is a real architect. And you're proving to the hiring manager that you can operate at that level, which is going to create confidence. And confidence matters because the hiring managers are trying to reduce the risk of anyone they hire. And when they interview someone, they ask, if I hire this person, will they succeed? And your portfolio is proof that you will. It's your evidence that you will be successful and you will be a great hire. So that's the point of the portfolio. So I do want to be clear about the technical components. I'm not saying you should never learn Terraform. I'm not saying you shouldn't understand Linux or any of the cloud technology. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is your portfolio needs to represent you as an architect and not you as an engineer. And that's what's going to get you hired. I don't want you to say, I deployed this or configured this or I wrote this script, because that's showing you don't even know what the architect job is. But if your goal is to be a cloud architect and your portfolio shows all cloud architecture work, well, your portfolio is showing you can get the job, do the job, and be effective at it. And this is exactly what we teach at Go Cloud Careers. We don't just teach people to pass certifications. We train people to become real world cloud architects, enterprise architects, security architects, and AI architects. Because we don't just teach the technical foundations, which we teach as well. We also teach business acumen, executive communication, leadership skills, stakeholder management skills, and how to act and function like an architect. Because architects are not paid to click buttons. We are paid to create business outcomes. If you want to build a real architecture career, subscribe to this channel and learn how real architects think, communicate, and lead. If you'd like to learn how to become an architect, join me on a free architecture webinar. I hold 2 free architecture webinars per week where we will go over the skills of the architect. We will talk about what hiring managers desire in the architect. We'll talk about the right portfolio to build as an architect. We'll give you tips for your resume, your LinkedIn profile, and even which certifications to get as an architect. And we'll even give you some tips on winning the architect interview. You can register for any of these free and live architecture webinars in the description of this video. These free architecture webinars are on Zoom, so you can ask me any questions you desire in real time about your architecture career, and we'll be happy to answer them. I hope to see you in another video real soon. Take care, everyone.